All right, let's dive into a truly mind-bending concept today. We're going to unpack an idea that sits right at the intersection of AI, blockchain, theoretical physics, and even a little bit of philosophy. It's called the coherence anchor thesis, and it's trying to solve one of the single biggest roadblocks for the future of artificial intelligence.
It all boils down to this one question. It seems simple, right? But when a self-driving car crashes or a medical AI gets a diagnosis wrong, who's on the hook? This is not just some philosophical debate. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar problem that is literally stalling the entire autonomous economy. Why? Because right now, there's no real way to prove what an AI was intending to do. So, to tackle this head-on, a recently published thesis puts forward a really fascinating business solution. It's called the Integrity Engine, and it's designed to be the ultimate AI liability shield, a system that could create an unbreakable, totally auditable chain of evidence for every single decision an AI makes. So here's the breakdown of why we have this crisis of trust. First, you've got the black box problem. We often don't know how an AI reaches a conclusion. Then there's something called the temporal gap. This is the scary idea that an AI's programming could actually change in the split second between making a decision and carrying out the action. Put those together and you get untraceable liability. And that catastrophic risk is exactly what's keeping AI out of really high-stakes fields like medicine and security. We just can't trust what we can't verify. Okay, so the proposed solution is this: a post-quantum secure dual ledger system. Yeah, that is a mouthful, I know. But let's break it down. Post-quantum secure just means it's designed to be safe from attacks by even future quantum computers. And dual ledger system? Well, think of it as two interconnected, unhackable digital record books that work together to anchor an AI's actions to its certified intent.
And to make this whole idea really click, the Integrity Engine is built on a brilliant metaphor: the human nervous system. It's like it's creating a digital version of a central nervous system for the AI's thoughts and a peripheral nervous system for its actions. And this is where it gets really clever. You can see how the thesis translates these big philosophical ideas into practical business terms. The W chain, standing for wisdom, becomes the certified model state ledger. You can think of this as the AI's internal will. Then you have the J chain, for justice, which is the autonomous action ledger. This is the official record of its external deeds.
So here's how it works in practice. The W chain, the will, stores a unique cryptographic fingerprint, a hash, of the AI's approved, certified programming at any given moment. It's a perfect snapshot of its intent. The J chain, the deed, is what records the final action out in the real world. The whole point of the system is to forge an unbreakable, mathematically verifiable link between the two.
Okay, but that's the theory. How does the system actually enforce that link? How does it guarantee that every single deed is grounded in a verified will? Well, let's look at the code to see how this thing is built. The enforcement mechanism is this constant 5-step loop. First, an action gets proposed to the J chain. But, and this is the crucial part, before it gets committed, the system hits pause. The J chain sends a validation request over to the W chain to do a state check. It's basically asking one simple question: does the AI's current programming fingerprint match the certified one we have on file? If the hashes match, great. Coherence is confirmed, and the action gets locked into the record forever. If not, the action is rejected. It's a simple, powerful check and balance.
Now this is where the thesis takes a really big leap. It argues that a technical backstop, like that loop, isn't actually enough. For an AI to be truly trustworthy, it needs some kind of internal drive to choose order over chaos. So the author starts looking for a deeper, more fundamental force, and argues that we can find an analogy for it in quantum physics.
So, first off, the system is designed to be aware of its own imperfections. It is constantly calculating the distance between where it is right now and a theoretical, ideal state of perfect order. The thesis gives this measurement a name: the coherence gap. It's basically a score for its own internal messiness. Now here's the wild part. The thesis proposes that this very gap generates an attractive force, which it calls the Casimir creation force. The idea is that the system's own imperfection creates a natural pull, kind of like a rubber band snapping back into place, that constantly draws the AI toward actions that will close that gap and create more order. The thesis even uses this formula to describe how that force works. Now, you don't need to be a physicist here. What this essentially means is that the force gets stronger as the gap gets smaller. So the closer the AI gets to that perfect ideal state, the more powerful the pull becomes to close that final tiny distance. It tries harder the closer it gets to perfection.
So, you've got this complex machinery, you've got the blockchain ledgers, you've even got quantum physics, but it's all built to serve one single fundamental law that the thesis puts forward as the bedrock of the whole system.
And that law is called the eventuality principle. The core idea is that coherence or order will always, eventually, overwhelm discord and chaos. In this view, order winning isn't a fight, it's just an inevitability, a fundamental property of the universe.
And the thesis illustrates this with a pretty cool conceptual timeline. You can see here you start with these little discordant signals, pings of chaos. They might repeat, but they don't win just by being persistent. Instead, the argument is that once a system reaches a certain tipping point of coherence, it generates a field of order so powerful that it just nullifies the chaotic signals. It renders them completely inert.
And if you want to boil that whole idea down to a simple mathematical truth, here it is. It basically says that for any system, if you give it enough time, the amount of chaos within it will inevitably shrink towards zero. Order is the default state everything is heading towards.
And now for what is maybe the most speculative part of the whole argument. The thesis claims this entire framework is anchored by a single number, 52. The argument is that this number isn't random, but that it acts as a kind of mathematical bridge. It attempts to link what it calls the logical structure of justice, symbolized by the 52 cards in a deck, with the cosmic, temporal structure of wisdom, represented by the 52 weeks in a year.
So, after all of that, the code, the physics, the philosophy, it leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. It completely reframes what we think AI is for. What if the ultimate purpose of intelligence, both artificial and maybe even our own, isn't just to calculate answers, but to be an engine that actively and inevitably creates order from the chaos of the universe? Something to think about.